Go into your working folder and locate a document with the name typefactory.psd and open that one up if you will. We are about to enter the world of the written word. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever used the type tool right down here? Most of you would probably raise your hands, I would think. Not everybody, but most. Let me rephrase that question. How many have ever typed on their computer? I'm talking emails, chats. We'd all raise our hands. Andy, is this a chapter on typing? Because I'll skip it. I know how to type, okay? I don't need to learn how to type. That's not why we're here. We're here to look at the relationship between type and how we use it in Photoshop. Now let's start with the definition of Photoshop in terms of type. By no stretch of the imagination is this program a typesetting layout type program like InDesign. But just because it isn't a layout program for your next murder mystery novel doesn't mean we don't use text. Type Factory. I typed that in. Remember these when you were growing up and you learned the letters of the alphabet by copying them. Come down to the type tool. Now you click on it, you get 4 of them. Horizontal and vertical type and horizontal and vertical masks. We'll talk about masks later. Let's go to plain old run-of-the-mill boring left to right text right here. Now if I come over here, you'll notice the cursor looks like an I-beam in a box, and that is very significant. If I click, it will create a new type layer. If you don't see the box around the I-beam, whether you know it or not, you are in a type layer, and when you click, you'll put more type in that layer. So we're looking for that now. Well, we don't have any type layers over here anyway. If I click, I get a type layer over in my layers panel. My I-beam changes to a naked I-beam without the box around it, and I get an insertion point. Now let me impress you with my typing skills. Now notice it keeps going and going and going. It doesn't go down to the next carriage return or the next line. I could go to the ends of the universe, and it would not go down to the next line. We have to tell it. Now to tell it, what we do is basically hit the carriage return key, which is return on a Macintosh, and it's the enter key in Windows. So if I do that, I can go down to the next line. Is a brownie called a brownie because it's the color brown? Now I don't like its position within my little box right there. I don't have to go to the move tool to change it. If I go underneath it until I see the arrow come up, I can move it if I want to. I can then come back in and begin typing. Let me do this. Let me misspell brown by taking off one of those letters. I assume that's actually not a real word, but we'll find out in a second. Let's talk about spell checking. One of the things that I do believe, there is no excuse to have a document with a misspelled word in it because the computer will help us there. Now, it doesn't mean they're used correctly, but typically you use spell check and at least they're going to be spelled correctly. So let's come up here to the word edit and go down to check spelling. In check spelling, it's not saying it's incorrect. It's saying it's not in the dictionary. And that's an important distinction, obviously, because we have an add button here if you want to add it. Oh, I know that's a word. It's a name of one of my clients, and that's how he spells it. So I think I'll put it in there. I did that one time. You know what I did wrong? I added a word that was the name of a client that was misspelled. I was convinced that's how he spelled his name. If you really want to make people upset with you, misspell their name over and over again, and then add it to your dictionary so you can always do it forever. Add words if you want to, but be careful what you add. Now, bow is not what it is. It thinks it might be bow. But if I keep going down, there it is, brown. If it isn't here, obviously type it in. Now, I can ignore it or I can change it. I'm going to change it. It's done. Didn't find any more misspelled words, and I click OK, and we're done. I typed this sentence, brownie is a brownie, color brown, for a reason. I want to talk about find and replace. If you do these things, like check spelling and find and replace in programs like InDesign, you're probably looking and saying, man, there ain't nothing here. This is like bare bones. Well, this is not a typesetting layout program. Okay, if you're doing that much text, you're going to be in InDesign or somewhere else anyway. Now, I've already typed this in, brown to red. That's what I want to change. It remembers the last thing you did. I've got brownie, brownie, brown, and for some reason, I want that to be the word red. I know that doesn't make sense, but just bear with me. I want to go forward or search backward, if you turn that off. Is it case sensitive? Nah. This one, whole word only. If I do not check that, it will find the word brown in brownie, in this one too, and change it to ready, ready, red. If I don't want these words to change, I click up here, whole word only, and click change all. and it will only change that one. But if I had not done that, this would say ready, ready, red. So you want to be careful with whole words only. So spell check, find and replace. Let's check out a few more options here. Up at the top, right up here, you have, for example, fonts. If you want to change the font, you select it, come up here. You'll probably have different fonts than me, but you want to change to a different font, go for it. It's now too big. So we'll come over here to the font size, and we'll make that a little bit smaller. Okay, that's better. You do have an option here that's grayed out. Some fonts don't have styles, like italics, bolds, things like that. This one doesn't. But if it did, you'd see them here. Anti-aliasing helps smooth the text out. By default, it's on sharp, which is 9 times out of 10 the best one. You might want to, with different kinds of fonts, try different ones to see which one looks the best. You can change the formatting structure of the paragraph itself, left, center, right. If you don't like the color black, you can click here and change it to red. Over here, we can type warp. We'll talk about that later. This one opens up our paragraph controls. We'll talk about that later, too, in another chapter. This button cancels what you did or sets what you did, and then you have one more button over here, the world of 3D. These are the basic controls for working with text. I would say probably the majority of the time when you're working with text in Adobe Photoshop, everything you need is probably up here. Now let me show you one more thing. Let me put a period at the end of that sentence. What if we want to create another text layer? Now what some people would do is they might come up here and pick up a different tool. Then come back and pick up the typing tool, and see, there you go, you got it. Now if I come back in here, I reselect that box. How do I get out of that box with a shortcut? Because I want to create another separate typing box. I don't want this text in the same box. If you press the Enter key on your 10 keypad, if you've got a full-size keyboard, you got a 10 keypad, and there's an Enter key. If you do, it takes you right out, and there you go. If I click, I can put another box in. Let me go ahead and just press the Escape key and get rid of that. If I'm in this box and I don't have a 10 keypad, some people have those smaller wireless keyboards, and some of them don't have the 10 keypad. And if you're on a Mac, hold down the Command key and press Return. If you're in Windows, hold down the Control key and press Enter, and it'll do the same thing. Control of text is what we want. We don't use it a lot in Photoshop, but we do use it, and this is what this chapter is all about.